Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Barnard virtually. I'm Christine Valenza Shin, class presenting our week cover letters, making the case for hiring you. Let's do a quick test of sound and that everybody is able to hear and participate. Take a look in at your little dialog box and search for the section called questions. Not chat, but questions. And why don't you give a quick shout out, maybe just your name and how are you feeling about cover letters? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so maybe people aren't hearing me. Oh, there we go. Oh, you were just giving a more thoughtful reply, which is good. Irene, very challenged this task as a midlife career changer. Excellent point. Anybody else? Okay, well, at least I know Irene can hear me. Hopefully the rest of you can as well. If you don't want to talk about cover letters specifically, just shoot a name and what city you're phoning in from so I know you're out there. And we'll get started. I want to say welcome to everybody, those of you who've been joining us each Wednesday on various topics, and those of you who are popping in for the first time this week to talk about cover letters. So let's get started. Today we're talking about cover letters. Last week we looked at resumes. Next week we're looking at your LinkedIn profile. And together these three items are the tools you use to present yourself effectively throughout the job search process. So there's a couple different ways of thinking about cover letters. One is to think of it as a bridge between the job description and your resume. The job description obviously describes the company or organization's wish list of what they would like you to do in the job, and your resume lists your skills and experiences, and the cover letter can be a really effective step between the two to help frame how they view your resume, especially in light of what they're looking for. Another way of thinking about cover letters, not necessarily a different way, these can all be complementary, is to use it as an opportunity to tell why you want the job and show how you'll be good at it. And finally, this is especially apropos to alumni and with their varied careers and experiences. It can be used to address or explain concisely and positively perceived or real weaknesses in your work history. And so that goes actually back to the second point of sort of a frame, or the first point I made about the bridging is it's a frame. You can use it as a framework for how to see your experience. And so depending on what the particular issues are with your work history, you can use a frame and explanation. Great. I'm just going to stop for a second and take a look at a few more questions. All right. So Celine is from Miami, and she's feeling okay about cover letters, but always looking for more tips. Sorry, I'm having trouble with this little question section. Lisa's joining us from Seattle. Okay, so we've got Seattle, Miami, and I believe New York already represented, and a number of other people on the webinar. So let's keep going. So one question that gets asked a lot, or sometimes said as a statement, cover letters are dead, cover letters are obsolete. And so it's a question we get. It's certainly true that cover letters are asked for less frequently. There's a number of jobs where, there can be job listings where they don't even ask them or ask for them, or a person can tell you directly, don't need a cover letter, just send me your resume. Even more so, even when they're either optional or required, there are many headhunters and recruiters and HR folks and hiring managers who will tell you, I don't even read them. And that's for a variety of reasons. I'd say the number one reason people don't read them is they're very boring and very much the same. And one of the things we're going to look at today is how to write a non-boring cover letter and to stand out from the crowd, not blend in. So, but a couple key points is when a cover letter is required or optional, a way to look at it is it's a really good opportunity to stand out from other applicants and to demonstrate that you write well. And I would argue that where cover letters are required, one of the main reasons they are required is because writing is important. And so it becomes a demonstration of your ability to write well. So, and for the people who do care about cover letters, they're super important. So even some of my colleagues here at Barnard I've talked to about hiring for particular positions, and some people care about cover letters, some people don't. For the people who care about them, it's really important. And so if you've got an interesting letter that's well written, that alone can be enough to get you an interview. And cover letters, I would say in general, are easier to customize for each job than resumes. Just from a formatting point of view, it's easier to customize paragraphs than it is to, you know, go through and change around bullets. So as we talked about last week, you do want to tweak your resume to reflect the specific job that you're applying to, but I'm not a big fan of completely rewriting it. Whereas cover letters, even though you will be able to use some elements over and over again, I do think they should be fairly individual, you know, and very, very much customized for each job. Okay. Great. So, couple of do's. Unlike resumes, there's no debate here. Very rarely debate here. You really should stick to one page. Part of that is the reason stated above, which is a lot of people won't read them, and especially if they're long and very dense, people will not read them, and so it's kind of a waste of time. So you want to really keep them concise, keep them to one page. There is the occasional exception, and that is usually specified. So I worked with an alumna a number of years back who was applying to be a rabbi, and they called it a cover letter. It was really almost more, it reminded me more even of like graduate school personal statement or something, but they basically specified that it could be, you know, it should be a minimum of 3 or 4 pages and could be up to 20 pages. And it was asked a series of questions. So again, I wouldn't describe that as a cover letter, but they did. So, so bottom line, unless you're specifically invited to go on for longer, assume that cover letter means 1 page. You want to be, you know, all those good things, clear, concise, use direct language. We'll talk a little bit more about another school of thought that really wants them to be very warm and conversational. As we mentioned last week, incorporating keywords and short phrases from the job description can be useful. You don't need to go crazy on this, but if there's a way to smoothly incorporate some keywords or phrases that keep popping up in the job description, that can be helpful both in terms of, as we mentioned last week, if it's a human eye that's reading these first, or an electronic eye in the form of software, word search software, or an applicant tracking system, seeing those keywords, matching those keywords, and short phrases can be good. I keep saying short phrases because you should not be lifting big chunks of paragraphs out and that kind of thing. But if there's keywords that pop up a lot, you know that it's important to them, and so it's okay to directly incorporate those. Tell very short stories from your professional experience that demonstrate the skills. So this goes to that show, don't tell, that good old writing advice. So instead of just rewriting your resume in paragraph or sentence form, you want to give some fresh information, and a great way to think about this is, are there some quick examples, short stories you can tell that demonstrate that you are good at a particular thing or have experienced a particular thing? And then obviously get it right. I say obviously, I'm assuming you've retained your high Barnard writing standards, but it never hurts to double check it, and actually having somebody else cast an eye over it is always helpful as well. We've all been there where we're working on something, whether it's a letter or document, and going over and over it, and it's easy to miss our own mistakes. So you want to make sure, but you know, again, you get 2 to 3 pieces of paper or 2 to 3 pages to represent yourself for the first time to someone in many cases. And so spelling, grammar, basic facts about the company. And the Barnard University is a real life example from some unfortunate person who applied for a job a couple years ago. Do your basic due diligence so that you know if something's a college or a university, get the name of the company right. We've had people who've missed the fact that Barnard is a women's college, so pay attention to detail. Okay, just seeing if there's any quick questions. If you do have any questions as we go along, use the question feature. The chat feature doesn't work as well, so ignore that and just put anything into the questions. And Irene is confirming that she does live in New York City near the Columbia football field. Irene is a fellow class of '84 classmate, which is why I'm speaking as if I know her, because I do. All right, back to PowerPoint. I've referenced Ask a Manager a few times and will continue to do so. It's a great workplace advice column with really good practical advice on the job search process. Instead of pretending that her wise advice is mine, I've given you a few tips directly from her. We've mentioned this already, but talking about boring cover letters. One of the things that makes them so boring or repetitive is that almost a huge percentage of people writing cover letters just take their resume and put it into sentence or paragraph form or parts of their resume. And that, to me, it's just a waste of real estate. You've got a fresh page. What's some new information you can give? Certainly you can frame it and you can use various entries on your resume, various jobs that you've had as an anchor, but you want to give over most of the real estate, most of the space on the page to new information that they don't have already from your resume. Right. The second bullet is how do you get in the right frame of mind? Another thing that tends to make cover letters very boring is this very business letter, professional speak. I have a proven track record of these things that have become sort of such common tropes in the cover letter that, again, people reading them, their eyes glaze over and their temptation is to skip over not only that part, but possibly the whole letter. So trying to get that tone, trying to capture why you're interested in the job, why you'll be good at it, think of it that way. And very often when I work with a lot of people, students and alumni who have developed a real block around cover letters, and it's become sort of a stumbling point for them. And one of the pieces of advice I'll give is to put a timer on, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and just write a cover letter in normal conversational English. Don't worry about, format and stuff. Just try and capture your this essence of why you're interested in it, why you'd be good at it. That could be by hand, if that's still the easiest way for you to do a draft, or on the computer. And then I'll have people clean it up just enough so it makes sense, put it into paragraphs, make sure the sentences have punctuation, and then send me that very rough draft so that I can sort of see that sort of raw material. What are you trying to capture? And then we talk through about how can we, sort of format that or structure it a little bit better so that it conforms to the basic format, but still retains your voice and your personality. Right? You want to be genuine, not stiff. And then there's the whole salesy thing, which a lot of people are really uncomfortable with. They feel like cover letters that you're bragging or you're selling yourself. I get that question a lot. The way I titled this webinar is how I think about it. It's less about selling yourself and more about making a case for why you are a good fit for this position. Maybe that's semantics, but I think it helps people get away from this feeling that they're somehow doing something, awkward or uncomfortable or braggy. But people do have a tendency to slip into that, especially in the first paragraph. I read an awful lot of cover letters that say, I would be the best candidate. I'm the best candidate for this position. Well, that's a good example of hyperbole. You have no way of knowing if you're the best candidate. You may be a very strong candidate. You could say that, but you want to just stay away from those sort of lofty, salesy, overstatements, and just keep it, again, more genuine, more conversational about what makes you good at what you do, what's going to make you good at this job, and why you want it in the first place. And do customize your letter. And again, unlike, it gives you an opportunity to really delve in with nuance to some of the specifics of a particular position. And that's another important point. Job descriptions, well, it's interesting what's been happening with job descriptions. On the one hand, some of them have gotten super long. This seems to be, the nonprofit sector seems particularly prone to this, where you can have like a 3-page job description with every possible thing you could ever ask to be done, to do. And on the other hand, there's a sort of newer style of job descriptions that's popping up a lot in the tech and startup and sort of edgier, newer company, which is getting away completely from the responsibilities, qualifications model. And, there was a model floating around a couple of years ago where it may still be out there of we are, and then it would describe the company, and then you are, and it would describe in a few words or phrases who they're looking for, So either way, you need to sort of deal with the job description as it is, but the important point is you don't have to answer every single thing that's in the job description, especially those super long ones that look like contracts. You're trying to sift through what's important to them that's a good match for you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Okay, let me see if there's any questions before we move on. Okay, I hope you're going to talk in more detail about the first paragraph. Absolutely. Okay, in fact, I'm going to give you a model for all 4 paragraphs in just a moment. Okay. I did want to focus in on one particular piece of advice that I mentioned up front, which is about addressing red flags. And I put red flags in quotes because sometimes there is a genuine concern or weakness in your resume. Maybe you've been at a bunch of places for a short time. Maybe you've got some long gaps in your work history. Maybe you've moved around a lot to many different industries and roles, and so there's not a sort of coherent career narrative to be told. And then sometimes it's just perceived, people, a hiring manager could have a hang up about someone who's making a career transition or somebody who appears overqualified. Or maybe you really are overqualified in a sense. So how to address these? Oh, and I already failed before I send you the PowerPoint from this. And yes, those of you who haven't been on earlier sessions, I will send these slides as well as a recording of the webinar afterwards. So I need to go back in and fill in my example for overqualified. I didn't do that, but I tried to capture a few of the others. So a red flag for a lot of places is if you live in a different city. For that reason, we talked about this on the resume last week. You don't have to put your address, but sometimes you're required in the online application. So in case that becomes a concern, you can go ahead and address this in a cover letter. My advice on this is to give as definitive a statement as you can. So if you're applying for something in Chicago, and you will move to Chicago, or there's a good chance you would move to Chicago if you got the job, then go ahead and say that. I'm moving from New York to Chicago in early January. It may be a little bit, some people think that's overstepping, but the key with addressing these red flags is you want to address them in a very confident, sure way. So again, we could get legalistic about it, but basically, if it's true or if it's a reasonable possibility that you would move for the job, then I think it's okay to say that plan. And then, of course, if you didn't get the job offer and you don't move to Chicago, it's not like the company that didn't hire you is going to check on that. So making a career transition. I've learned to write well under deadline during my 5 years as a journalist, but am now looking to put my communication skills to work for a cause I believe in. So here you're, again, emphasizing the positive, which is not, I hate journalism or journalism is a dying field, or maybe some of the more negative reasons you're moving out of it, but you're focusing in on, here's a great thing I learned to do. And now you're encapsulating why, one reason you're looking for a different sector. And so you're basically addressing the fact that you are making a transition, but you're putting it in a positive, specific way. Returning after a career gap. You know, it's funny, I struggled with this. I was editing it last night, and sort of, there's different ways of saying this, but if you've been out of the workforce for a significant period of time, you know, longer than a year, you're not necessarily, and you're not able to address that on the resume. You know, sometimes people can use volunteer gigs or freelancing to sort of not show that gap. But if there is a clear gap, and it's because you were home full time with kids, or you took time out for loved ones or your own illness, if any you know reason that you had a gap, you can address it directly in your cover letter. But notice it's not even a full sentence. It's a clause, right? After 2 years out of the paid workforce to care for my children, comma, I am excited to return to my work in healthcare administration, or whatever it is you're returning to. So you're trying to, the idea with all of these, with addressing the red flags, is just to sort of matter-of-factly explain the thing you're explaining, and then put that positive spin on it, or sort of transition to that forward-looking. Sure, I stayed home for 2 years, but what's important that you know now is I'm excited to come work for you, is the idea. Right? Or sure, I'm leaving journalism for mostly negative reasons, but the key point is I'm really excited to bring my skills somewhere else. Great. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you a cover letter formula. It is not the only one out there, but it's one way of approaching it, and I've used this a lot in helping people to target their cover letter to the job description, which can sometimes feel hard. So here we go. The cover letter formula is 4 paragraphs. I think cover letters, you could do 5. I've certainly seen ones even where people have a very sort of short paragraph style and maybe have up to 6 paragraphs, but I think 4 is a decent amount to shoot for. So the first paragraph obviously is your introduction. A classic way to start is to identify the position you're applying for, where you saw it posted. You don't always have to do that, but it's a tried and true way to start, and it does make sure that if somehow you got into the wrong pile or the wrong computer file, that they'll be able to see right away that, oops, wait, wrong place, wrong title. On the other hand, I was at a conference this summer where there was a panel of recruiters, always a great session. And one of the recruiters said about, somebody asked, are cover letters dead? Does anyone even read them? And her response was, I read the first sentence of each paragraph, and if it's interesting, I continue reading. If it's not, I don't. So that could argue for a more interesting first sentence right off the bat. So that's something to think about. Okay. And then the first paragraph, staying in the first paragraph, relatively short, you want to do a 1 to 2 sentences on why you're applying. And I think a key thing here, this is a good opportunity to, in a succinct way, convey the fact that you understand what you're applying for, you understand what the company does or what the team does, and then you're connecting your skills and experience to that. So I'm eager to bring my academic knowledge and clinical experience to St. Mark's Caring Community's exemplary work for the residents of Lower Manhattan. So basically, you're sort of feeding back what they do, what St. Mark's Caring Community does, and you're connecting the fact that you've got both academic background and some clinical experience that's going to be apropos to the job, right? You don't have to get into tons of detail about either you or them at this point, but you're just connecting the two. You're connecting what you bring to their mission or their goal. Another example, I would love to bring my diverse skills and experience to the important work you do in preserving our city's diverse history. Oops, I shouldn't have used diverse twice. So you could just say skills and experience. You could characterize them as in the example above, right? But you're looking to, again, sort of succinctly convey what you're bringing to it. Okay, keep it short, keep it compelling. Second paragraph. All right, this is a body paragraph, and this is a formula that addresses the sort of more typical job description that's still out there, where they tell you a little bit about the company or organization or the team, and then they have a list of responsibilities and then a list of qualifications. So the sort of simple formula that can work is to make one paragraph about the responsibilities and one paragraph about the qualifications. So, and again, this could be a long list. There could be a long list of responsibilities. There could be just a few. You, regardless of how long their list is, you want to pick one or two key ones that seem important to them and that are a good match for your skills and experiences. So how can you tell if it's important to them? What do they list first? Do they keep repeating certain keywords or phrases over and over again? I went through a job description with an alumna a couple of months ago where they kept using discreet, confidential, professional, ethical, they kept using words like that. And so, so that was a obvious clue to her to really focus in on, even though that hadn't been the main part of one of her jobs, but there was, I forget the specific job we were referring to. She might have worked as a paralegal or something like that. So that was sort of her cue to talk about that experience, where she did have to be particularly aware of being confidential and discreet and private. Okay. The second thing, probably this is the most common edit I make to people's cover letters that they share with me, is to write the topic sentence based on the job description, not your resume. A topic sentence based on your resume, and we all have them or have had them in the past, is during my time as a lab assistant at University X. So you're basically making the topic sentence, and the paragraph is going to focus on a particular role you had. There's nothing wrong with referencing particular roles and experiences you've had, but don't lead. If you lead with it, it means that you're focusing on sort of you and not them. So this is a simple trick to make sure you're focusing on what they're looking for. So what you want to do, again, is you're sort of taking one or two key responsibilities or sort of lumping something together and leading with that. So I'm adept at managing multiple projects at once and meeting tight deadlines. So those are probably two things that were in the list of responsibilities, and this person is choosing to focus in on that. And then once you've sort of declared the topic of your paragraph, then you want to give one or two specific examples or stories of when you've done that. This is the show part, right? And how do you tell us? I keep saying story and narrative. You want to try and capture that. So it's like the first time you did something, or my proudest moment, or this all came together for me on one project. You're trying to capture an actual moment in time that you can use to show and represent the qualities, the skills, the experience they're looking for. So you see that example there. Okay, let's take a look at questions. Do you have more examples on this point which also refer to your jobs? I've got a few more examples, and then I've got some samples, one of which I was able to load up and one of which I wasn't, so I can send it to you afterwards. So yeah, so hopefully we'll get more. Okay. Third paragraph, also a body paragraph. And here, again, according to this formula, and it's not the only formula, but according to this formula, you want to choose, now you choose one or two key qualifications listed in the job description that are, again, a good match for your experience. Same piece of advice, make sure the topic sentence is based on what they're looking for, not your resume, and then fill in with examples and stories. And that last point, that last bullet, is because that list of qualifications, some of it can be very specific, about degrees needed and skill sets needed, but almost always in that list of qualifications are some of the softer skills or sort of more kind of good citizen, good worker qualities, prompt and punctual or responsible or good collaborator, etc. This can be really helpful for those of you who are making a shift to a different role or a different sector. You can focus in on transferable skills. So, those general good worker qualities, there is a similarity between, whether you work in the sciences or in the nonprofit or in the corporate sector or in, within specific industries. everybody still would like people who are responsible and professional and good writers, and there's qualities that cut across. There's even more specific qualities and skills that transfer to other opportunities, and that so you can look for that if you're making that transition. All right, and then your fourth paragraph is your conclusion. Also short, it's not, your body paragraph should be longer, more substantive. Your first and last paragraph should be shorter and to the point. And it actually has similarities to the introduction. So now you want to refer in a fresh way to a key attribute or mission of the company. So either pick something different or write it in a different way, and how you'll contribute. And then there's various ways of ending a cover letter. I like to end it on this sort of optimistic note. I look forward to the opportunity to meet in person to further discuss the experience and skills I can bring to your team. The idea here, basically what you're saying is you're going to want to bring me in for an interview. And you're basically suggesting that that would be a great thing to do. Talk to me further, learn more about me. It's optimistic without being, I think, presumptuous. You could say I look forward to an opportunity, so it can be a good way of ending it. People one of the boring things people do is end it with, you can reach me at such and such. You don't need to put that. Your phone number, your email, it's either already at the top of your cover letter, it's certainly at the top of your resume. So, ending with those kind of details, that extraneous details, I'd rather you end with a strong positive statement, whether it's summing up everything or it's like this, talking about what you hope happens next. So. Okay, what's the difference between responsibilities and qualifications? So on a job description, basically the responsibilities is usually the list of things. It's basically, that's sort of the part that's the actual description of the job. So that's where very often employers will list all of the things you would be expected to do. So we've been working on a job description here for a position that's going to be partly doing sort of coordinator roles as well as some advising. And so we wrote out a list of the different things we need the person to coordinate, whether it's events or marketing or logistics, communications, that type of thing. And then also what advising roles they would have. So it's basically a list. It's sort of, in many cases, an overview or a sort of comprehensive list of what you would be expected to do in the job. Qualifications can range anything from specific to you must have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to you must be able to use Excel to, as I said, some of those softer qualifications, promptness, attention to detail, good communication, it's sort of those broader qualities that they would like someone to bring. Okay. And the reason I structured it this way is that a great many job descriptions out there are structured that way. Not all of them, and like I say, it's a bit of a changing landscape, but it's a very common way of organizing a job description, and therefore, by organizing your cover letter this way, you don't have to do it, but it helps. I find that it helps a lot of people make sure that they are connecting their case that they're making in the cover letter to what the company is actually looking for. So, okay. Some frequently asked questions. Who do you address it to? Oop, we've got everything popping up at once. So if a specific name is listed in the posting, great. Make sure you spell it correctly. Make sure you use the correct title, or if it doesn't say Mr. or Ms. or Mrs. or any honorific like that, you could simply do first name, last name. Sometimes it will say, reporting to the vice president for finance or something like that. And if you can figure out from the company website or from LinkedIn who the vice president of finance is, you could do that. It takes a little bit of hunting, and of course you can't be 100% sure that it's up to date. Another possibility, if you would, you could call or search and find out the head of HR, that's a good policy if you're sending it to HR. Like frequently, if they're having you send a cover letter and resume to, HR at company X, you could do that. But Bottom line, and it's the bottom bullet, generic is fine. Just saying, dear hiring manager. And what the hiring manager means, it could mean anything from the person, from a manager in HR who does the hiring to the person who's just the manager in whatever group that's hiring the position, that's leading the hiring. So it's a nice generic, basic thing. You can't go wrong with it. No one is going to be offended by that. All right. This question comes up from time to time. Should I name drop? In other words, should you share names of people you know at the company? If you got the lead or found out about the job, or somebody has recommended you for the job that's currently within the company, then you can be upfront about that. That could be something you put in your first paragraph. Otherwise, you want to use your discretion. Some industries, I'm thinking of sort of the entertainment industry, it's very important, and everybody kind of accepts, the name dropping, or, being upfront about your connections, and so you might use it. Other places, especially if all you had was, say, an informational interview with someone at the company, and, it's not necessarily going to carry a lot of weight, you could leave it out. Right? And then this question comes up a lot, especially, with emailing, is can you just make the email the cover letter? You certainly can do this if a cover letter is not asked for, or if they instruct you to do that. I would keep the email probably even shorter than a normal cover letter then. I'm thinking even just a paragraph or two to sort of focus in, even more focused version of real simple, like why you're interested, why you'll be good at it, and but if a cover letter is specifically asked for, then make it a separate document. You can send it as a PDF or a Word attachment, or some people will even create a single PDF of, they'll scan and use a or create, or however they do it, create a single PDF that has the cover letter followed by the resume. So you can either send it as 2 attachments or 1. All right, so some samples. I tried to load up a number of samples and was only, for some reason, it kept rejecting. So if you go on your little dashboard to handouts, you should be able to see a Word document that says sample cover letter, young alumna, right? Can everybody see, let me know if you can't see that and can't open it up. You should be able to click on it and have it open. So let me know if that works. I haven't done this before. And then it's not opening for me, but that might be because I'm the host. So I'm going to pop over to my, where is it? Sample cover letter. Where is the one I wanted? Oops. All right, it's not popping up. Okay, actually, I think because you can see my screen, okay, so people were able to open it up. Let me see if I can quickly and easily find that sample. There we go. Okay, so I may have changed it slightly, but I'll bring this up on my screen for anybody who can't see it and for me. Okay, so I'm going to call your attention to one thing. So the last time I edited this and put it up on the Alumni Relations website as a resource was 2016. And, my thinking about cover letters and some of the different examples I've seen have changed a little. So let's look at this. This is not necessarily a perfect example, but actually I'd be interested in your feedback of what you like about it and what you don't like about it. So take a second to read it in light of some of what we've been discussing, and then type into the questions what you think, anything you like in particular. Okay, so links worked for 2 people. Okay, and Irene was having trouble finding where. So I think my dashboard looks differently from yours, but there should be sort of a dialog box or something that says handouts. So take a look, but if not, you should be able to see it on my screen now, hopefully. And as I said, I will, I'll go ahead and attach these separately. There were a couple that I wasn't able to upload, so I'll attach some samples. All right, so we've got one comment. I thought the last sentence of the second paragraph is great. I was pleased to be asked by my supervisor to develop and facilitate a workshop for clients on nonviolent conflict resolution. So that's I like that as well. I think that it's a good example of giving a specific example, telling a quick story. It's not the most exciting story in the world, but it tells basically that she was working conflict mediation skills and using them well. It got noticed by her supervisor, and she was asked to turn that into a workshop. So that's helpful. That could be a resume bullet, but it's not probably likely to be a resume bullet. So it's a good example of how you could work in a more specific example in a cover letter. Any other query? Good. Okay, you can see it on the screen. Is this cover letter too short? Also, how detailed should the story part be? So this is a pretty succinct cover letter, and is it too short? It's hard to gauge that. I would say in general, given that many people skip cover letters or are bored by them, that short is good. It could be a little longer, and I'll show you another example that is a little bit longer, but it's pretty succinct, and I don't think it's necessarily too short. And on terms of being detailed, when I say story, you need to be really careful actually not to go into a lot of detail about the story. You want to really think about how can I quickly tell this. And so that she really tells a whole story in one sentence about being asked by her supervisor. Again, it's not a traditional story in the sense of a beginning, middle, and end, but it's basically a quick recap of something that happened. Okay. Anything that other people like or dislike? So we've got a comment in the first paragraph. The second line is more neutral generic than it needs to be. Doesn't say anything about the applicant. I'm eager to bring my academic knowledge and professional experience to St. Mark's Caring. Yeah, I mean, it probably could be a little bit more detailed, more compelling, but again, it's a little bit of a preview. It's like, I've got academic knowledge, I've got professional experience, and it's, again, connecting, it's sort of praising them and connecting them to their mission and letting them know what you want to do. But yeah, I think it could be a little more personal, a little less business speak. Good point. Can you speak to the formula approach of including bullets of more of the qualifications along with how you address those? I have seen and used that format quite a lot. Excellent. Yeah, actually, I've been meaning to get a sample of this up. There's a name for this, but it's never caught on widely, but I think people respond to it well. It's an exam. So one way of doing a cover letter is to have sort of an opening paragraph and a closing paragraph, and instead of doing body paragraphs, to actually do bullet points. And so you can do a couple of just quick bullet points on your own. Another thing I've seen is a double row of bullet points, or even a table where on the left you list the key, some key things they're looking for, and on the right you list how you match up with that. It's a pretty interesting way of approaching it. I've heard from a number of people who've used it that they've gotten positive reactions to it, because I think it's positive because it is different. They're mixing up the typical format of a cover letter, and so it stands out. And it's also being very direct about what we're talking about, which is, here's what you're looking for, here's the way in which I've done that. Yeah, so let me see if I can come up with a good example of that, and I can also attach that. And actually, who is it? Lisa, if you have a good example of that and are willing to share, feel free to email it to me, and just give me some instructions on how much you want me to change the details, so that it's not, and you don't have to share it. Sometimes people don't want to share their cover letters because they don't want people imitating them. But if anybody has a good sample they're willing to share, send it my way. Otherwise, I'll keep looking. So, and find one. Can we look at an older alumnus letter too? My problem is that I often find myself writing sentences that are too long and highlighting all those different skills I would bring to a position. Yeah, actually, I have an experienced one. So let's take I want to check one thing. There we go. Not letting me go back. Okay. Yeah, so let's look at the experienced alumni cover letter sample. And again, last time I edited this was a couple years ago, so I like some things about it, and I would change some things about it. So I'm curious what all you have. Okay. All right, so take a look at this one and send any feedback my way. What you like, what you don't like. Okay, we're getting close to our ending time, so I'll jump in here and say, you know, the first paragraph's a little bit longer than sometimes the first paragraph is, but it's nice and anecdotal, and and she's basically using this story of not only of her family history, but of her recent visit to capture really the essence of what the New York City Housing Museum does, as well as her personal connection to it. So where there's that kind of opportunity, I think that's a good example of a compelling way to start. And in some ways, I would say her second sentence might even be a good first sentence to just jump right into that story, you know, after passing through the portals of Ellis Island. You know, it would certainly be a different way of starting. And then she could either weave in the please accept my application elsewhere in that paragraph, you know, sort of at the bottom of that paragraph, or, you know, she could potentially leave it out. And then I think you know, the first sentence of the second paragraph, I have extensive experience designing and implementing a variety of programs. That's a good example of, you know, a sentence that comes from the job description. The next paragraph, in my 10 years of teaching, resume focused, but she gets pretty quickly to sort of this list of things she's done. Not a great, I wouldn't say that's a great topic sentence. This short paragraph is fairly listy, you know, where she's just kind of checking off different items in the job description. It's not a terrible thing to do because, you know, part of what you're trying to show is that you have experience doing those things. So, okay. All right, I'm going to move along. I'm also going to send you, but we're not going to go over it now, a before and after from the Ask a Manager website, where somebody agreed to let their before and after versions of a cover letter. It's a sort of an extreme example of the advice to be very warm, be very conversational, be very personal. And some people like it, some people don't, but I think it's worth thinking about how you can change up what you do. Change up what you do in cover letters, because especially if you're not getting a lot of responses. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. Sorry. Okay. It's worth thinking about changing up your approach. So my final thought is a quote from Allison Green. I think I had a quote from her last week as well. So food for thought. All right, and I'll attach, when I send you stuff, I will attach before and after example that captures some of what she's talking about here. Okay. As always, let's look ahead to what's coming next. So next week we'll look at the third and final part of your, you know, sort of employment or your job hunt package, so your LinkedIn profile. And then the next week we will look at not just your profile, but using LinkedIn as well as other in-person techniques to network, build your network, use your network. All right. Oops, that's wrong. Forget that third bullet. We did that at the beginning. Then we have interviewing, negotiating, and then once you're in your next, your ongoing professional development. So that's all coming up. As always, you can make a counseling appointment with me online through handshake. You can also make it with other advisors here at Beyond Barnard, or you can call the office directly to make an appointment. We're down a person at the, we're down an advisor at the moment, so things have been pretty busy. So you may not be able to get an appointment right away, but hopefully soon. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and any questions? Any additional questions before we sign off? Okay, not seeing any more questions. So see you next week, and I'll be in email with some of the materials from today. All right, so apparently there's still 4 attendees. Let me mute myself.